I often find myself lost in memories, tracing the delicate threads of the past that bind my heart to my son. The aroma of roasted garlic and simmering marinara sauce fills the air, a familiar scent that wafts through the kitchen as I prepare our favorite family dish. It's a ritual that speaks volumes of my love, one I started when he was just a boy, running around the house with flour-dusted hands, giggling as I caught him pretending to be a chef. Those moments of shared laughter, of cooking side by side, remain nestled in my heart like precious gems. As I chop fresh basil, I can almost hear the echoes of his youthful voice, excitedly asking if we can add more cheese to the sauce. The kitchen was our realm, a sanctuary during the challenging times. We would talk about his dreams, his fears, and the ever-changing world, weaving a tapestry of intimacy that only a mother and son could know. I remember the countless hours I spent supporting him through school, attending every parent-teacher meeting, savoring the pride swelling within me as I listened to his accomplishments. I made sacrifices, time, comfort, and even my own dreams because he was my priority, my heart's wish. When he struggled, I felt the shadows of my own disappointments whispering in my ear, urging me to do more to lift him. My hands are rough from years of work, but their calluses carry the weight of love and dedication. Yet, as I heal the wounds of my past with these cherished recollections, I cannot ignore the creeping feelings of unease that began when his fiancée entered our lives. At first she seemed enchanting, full of ambition and vigor. I welcomed her with open arms, eager to embrace this new chapter, to bond as family. But it wasn't long before subtle shifts altered the dynamics. During gatherings, I would catch the dismissive glances she exchanged with my son, the barely veiled contempt she displayed when I offered my thoughts, even on the simplest subject. I found myself retreating more often, a silent observer in what used to be my haven. The table that once felt warm and vibrant now felt like a battlefield, where words and glances became weapons wielded against me. Tension simmered under the surface. During family dinners, her tone dripped with mockery, especially when discussing my attempts to engage with my grandchildren. "They don't need to hear all your old stories," she would say, her laughter ringing hollow, leaving me feeling bewildered and unwanted. My heart would tighten, unable to comprehend her disdain. Every time I offered a heartfelt suggestion, hoping to contribute to family traditions, I was met with an eye roll or an offhand comment that stung. "You're living in the past," she once quipped, while I felt the blood drain from my face. Behind her curt remarks lay a clear agenda to distance my grandchildren from me, to rewrite the narrative of our family history. Thus the seeds of my relationship with my son began to fray, a gradual decay that left me vulnerable and discarded. I can't shake the feeling of loss, the fear that my sacrifices have gone unrecognized, that the love I poured into him is now met with indifference. Each moment of humiliation feels heavier than the last, pressing down on my heart, whispering reminders of my silenced existence. Amidst the swirling emotions and memories, a singular thought solidifies, echoing in the silent spaces of my awareness. I must reclaim my dignity. I must gather my strength and confront the reality that I cannot remain voiceless forever. As the shadows of uncertainty loom, I realize I need a plan. In this swirling sea of betrayal and humiliation, I feel the faintest glimmer of hope. There's still time to turn this tide, to show my grandchildren the love that exists beyond mere photographs, to remind everyone what family truly means. The seasons turned, and it wasn't long before my son met her, my future daughter-in-law, who swept into our lives like an unwelcome breeze, unsettling everything I had come to know. At first glance, she was charming, her laughter bright and infectious, promising warmth and a new excitement for our family. Her wide smile drew my son in, captivating him like a moth to a flame. I welcomed this change, eager to embrace this new addition to our family with open arms. I still remember the day they announced their engagement. The sunlit garden was full of blooming flowers, the air thick with the scent of lilacs as we gathered to celebrate. She wore a white dress that glimmered in the soft light, and my son's gaze shone with pride. I fought the flutter of dread that tugged at my heart, for it was impossible to ignore how my role seemed to morph before my eyes. As the evening wore on, laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, yet beneath the surface I sensed an odd tension. Dismissing the gnawing feeling in my gut, I forced myself to focus on the joyous occasion. But as her laughter rang out, stabbing through moments that should have been joyful, I noticed the way she occasionally flicked her eyes toward me, narrowed and calculating as if gauging my reactions. During the toast I gave, her expression twisted from delight to disdain, watching how my words landed like unwanted stones. Weeks passed, and I grew increasingly aware of her disdain, disguised beneath layers of sweetness. I first noticed it at a family dinner shortly after their wedding. The dining room, set with care, fresh flowers in a vase, elegant place settings, should have felt warm. Instead, I felt the chill creeping in as I realized my son was on her side, nodding along with her dismissive comments. "Grandma's stories can be so boring," she said, her laugh like a sharp blade slicing through my intentions. I remember the way my son's smile faltered but quickly returned, a mask of complicity on his face that made my stomach drop. The way she orchestrated this, taking center stage in our gatherings, left me feeling like a ghost in my own home. I tried to engage with my grandchildren, eager to share stories of our family traditions. "Who wants to hear about the time I made the biggest chocolate cake?" I asked, my voice light, buoyed with excitement. But each time I started to recount these joyous memories, it felt as though a heavy curtain dropped between us. "They don't need to hear about your old cake or your old days," she interjected, her tone chirping over mine, cutting off the conversation. What had once been a lively exchange about family history quickly turned into an uncomfortable silence, an invisible wall that pushed me out further and further. I could practically feel the distance growing, like a body of water swelling to claim the shore. At family gatherings, I was increasingly sidelined. My opinions were waved away with a flick of her wrist, her dismissive interactions wrapping around me like chains. I would catch glimpses of my son, seated beside her, lost in her charm, only occasionally glancing my way, his silence a heavy weight upon my heart. It stung, each unacknowledged moment deepening a wound I could barely comprehend. I noticed how she manipulated our discussions. If I shared my love for gardening, she would chime in, "Oh, that must be how you've grown so many weeds." Her laughter would follow, inviting my son to join in, and I felt the laughter slapping me across the face. Did he not see how cruel she was? Did he not feel the suffocating air grow thicker whenever she spoke to me like that? Even simple moments were tainted by her influence. I began to dread holiday gatherings, knowing that the specter of her judgment would loom over each cherished moment. Last Thanksgiving had been the final straw. I sat at the table, spooning the cranberry sauce onto my plate, the warmth of family surrounding me, when she turned sharply. "That's way too much, don't you think?" She laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter echoed against the walls, leaving me feeling smaller than I ever thought possible. Beneath my growing discomfort, I felt a whisper warning me, an early sign of a war that was brewing under the guise of family unity. My son grew quiet, disappearing into the shadows of her influence. I began questioning everything I believed about love, loyalty, and respect within this tightly knit family. These feelings of betrayal overwhelmed me, and slowly I strayed into deeper contemplation, grappling with a truth I could no longer ignore. I had to prepare myself for the confrontation that awaited, the struggle to reclaim not just my dignity but the love and respect I felt was slipping through my fingers. Standing at the kitchen sink, washing the remnants of our last meal, I looked out the window and saw the sun dipping below the horizon, leaving rich colors splashed across the sky. It mirrored my resolve, beautiful yet fleeting. I silently vowed that I would not let the shadows cast by my daughter-in-law define my worth anymore. I needed to act, to gather my strength and reclaim what was rightfully mine before this house turned entirely into her domain. As the fading light reflected on the polished dishes, I felt a fire ignite within me. I can no longer remain silent. I must find my voice once more, and in doing so, resurrect the love that bound our family together, if not for myself, then for my grandchildren, who would never know the two-women bond that could exist outside of my daughter-in-law's disdain. Let her mockery serve as fuel for my fight. The winter breeze bit through the glass as I watched snowflakes flutter down, coating the world outside in a serene white blanket. Inside, however, the atmosphere grew increasingly stifling. The holiday season was upon us once again, and with it came the pressure to maintain appearances among family. Despite my heavy heart, I resolved to bring some cheer to our gatherings. I spent days baking gingerbread cookies and stitching together festive decorations, hoping to rekindle the warmth I longed for. The moment my family began to trickle in, their laughter rang in my ears. The festive scents of cinnamon and pine filled the air. Yet I felt a frigid barrier around me, a distinct chill, even amid the warmth of our home. My daughter-in-law entered last, her presence commanding, her smile captivating. I felt the shift instantly, like watching the last ember flicker in a dying fire. She wrapped her arms around my son, her head tilted back as if to say, "Look at me, the perfect wife." I invited them all to gather around the table, the centerpiece adorned with my carefully arranged holiday treats. With a quaking voice, I smiled and began serving the dinner I had prepared. A labor of love, yet her sharp comments sank through the meal like stones. "Wow, I didn't expect you to go all out. Probably in case anyone needed a second Thanksgiving," she remarked, her smirk cutting through the air. Laughter erupted around the table, deepening the fissures in my heart. It was innocent enough, or so it seemed, but the underlying intent felt unmistakable. Over the weeks, the subtlety of her mockery had morphed into overt humiliations, almost a ritual of sorts that left me feeling smaller each time. I bit my tongue, knowing that each snide remark chipped away at my confidence. I felt unanchored in my own family, as if I were the outsider in my own home. During a game of charades later that night, I watched with a heavy heart as she played, her expressive gestures drawing all eyes toward her. I hesitated, fearing unspoken judgments, but could no longer ignore the glimmer of hope nestled within my heart. My grandchildren giggled, fully invested in her performance, and despite my aching spirit, I knew this was a moment worth embracing. When it was my turn, hesitation gripped me, but I told myself, this was my family. I took a deep breath, attempting to channel my nervousness into a vibrant performance, mimicking the motions of a chef tasting soup. Laughter erupted, but as I glanced anxiously around, my eyes met hers. The smirk that spread across her face extinguished what little fire remained. She mouthed the words, "desperate," and my heart plummeted. Later that evening, as the snow began to drift outside, I retreated to the warmth of my kitchen. The remnants of our evening lay scattered around, a half-empty bowl of cookies, glasses tipped with leftover punch. I placed my hands on the countertop, grounding myself, almost as if needing to take root among the chaos. That's when I glimpsed the text notifications flashing across my son's phone, lying unattended near the dining nook. I had never been one to intrude, but curiosity pulled me closer. I could see her name light up the screen, a torrent of messages interspersed with heart emojis and exclamations about how amazing the dinner had turned out. Clearly, Grandma didn't bring her A game, one text read, punctuated with an eye roll emoji. My heart raced. I felt exposed, the sting of betrayal binding my thoughts like tangled threads. She wanted to isolate me, to strip away any semblance of authority I might have had before her arrival. Every little conversation, every gathering that had felt like home now bore her selfish mark. The sinking feeling in my stomach churned painfully, each humiliation laying root in my heart. Breathless, I retreated to my sunroom, seeking silence to ground myself. I cradled my grandmother's quilt against my chest, the soft fibers comforting against my skin. In that moment, I reflected on the collective joys and sorrows of my life. These very moments of laughter, hugs, and love had forged me into the woman I was. I could not let her diminish that, depriving me of my legacy. From that night onward, I subtly began recording instances of her unkindness. Each comment, each glance, the weight of accumulating insults transformed into a collection of reminders. Perhaps they could serve as evidence. Perhaps they could reinforce my quiet resolve to honor my place in this family. As winter snow blanketed the world outside, I began to nurture a quiet strength within me. My awakening turned into a poignant realization. I would no longer allow their definitions of me to shape my reality. My love had no expiration date, and though my heart had endured enough humiliation, it was stitched steadfastly with connections that I was determined to preserve. Don't let her mute you at the table. Never in your heart, I reminded myself, repeating the mantra like a bomb. Each silent humiliation would become my stepping stone back into the light, toward the respect and love that I deserved. The winds might be cold, but I felt warmth grow within me, palpable and undeniable. I refused to remain silent in my fight. I would reclaim my birthright, my dignity, and the love sown deep in the fabric of my family. The winter months dragged on, the snow piling higher outside as I focused on piecing together my strategy. My resolve deepened, though I knew the path ahead was fraught with pain. The gathering evidence of my daughter-in-law's humiliations became both a solace and a duty, a necessary act in my fight to reclaim the dignity she sought to undermine. I fashioned a journal, a simple leather-bound book where I meticulously jotted down each instance of her barbed comments, her sidelong glances, and her dismissive actions. It felt essential to both document the pattern and mentally disentangle my feelings, a cathartic exercise that steadied my heart. The pages turned into a refuge, a quiet reminder of my grievances that cannot be ignored or brushed aside any longer. I remember the day I captured the most hurtful moment of them all. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon in March, and I had invited everyone for a casual lunch. My heart fluttered with the hope of rekindling the warmth that once enveloped my gatherings. I had spent the morning preparing my signature chicken soup, breathing in the comforting aroma as I simmered the broth. I laid the table with fresh linen, the fabric soft against my fingers, hoping to cultivate an inviting atmosphere. As I stirred the pot, my son and daughter-in-law arrived early. They entered with playful banter, infusing energy into the kitchen, but I felt the familiar trepidation wash over me. Taking a deep breath, I was determined to stand my ground. I wished to dispel the ghost of conflict that lingered between us like a specter in the air. The conversation flowed casually at first, talk of recent family trips, the mischief of my grandchildren, but it wasn't long before she steered the topic toward me. Grandma makes amazing soup. Maybe someday she'll teach me how to make it, she declared, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I mean, if she can manage to get it right, that is. Her remark hung in the air like a thick fog, clouding the warm laughter that had filled the room moments before. I glanced at my son, who sat unaffected, perhaps oblivious to the slight. My soul tightened, aching with each breath I took. Beneath my facade of calm, a storm raged as I fought against the emotions threatening to spill over. As I ladled soup into bowls, the weight of her words hung heavy, and I forced myself to breathe deeply. I poured the steaming broth with trembling hands. The soup mirrored my simmering feelings, an amalgam of joy twisted with a craving for respect that felt increasingly out of reach. I decided then to engage her, to counter her cruelty with a boldness I hoped would send a message. You know, I began nervously, we each have different strengths. I'm more than happy to share what I know, and I always believe that learning is a two-way street. The laughter faded, but I felt a flicker of power ignite within me, a small victory nonetheless. I observed her surprise reflected in my son's gaze, but any exhilaration was short-lived, eaten away by her quick retort. I guess we'll see if I can handle the pressure. Her mockery fell like a shroud over the table, and the laughter regathered into something frail. That night, I added another entry to my journal, reliving every moment of her sharp words and my own hesitation. I recounted how it made me feel small, caricatured in my own life. My pen scratched fiercely against the paper, echoing the tumult of growing resolve within me. I would confront her openly, armed with both proof and witness to the cracks in our once harmonious relationship. As the weeks turned into months, I took care to observe the family dynamics. Every Sunday during our weekly gatherings, I watched my son's reactions to her jibes. Each glance he cast my way felt like a shift in the balance of our familial structure, a wounding silence cast between us that screamed for attention. The jagged rift between my desire for connection and the shame she brought felt like a sword thrust deeper into my already aching heart. On a surprisingly warm day in April, I witnessed an incident that solidified my growing unease. We were at the park with the kids, soaking up the sun as they ran in circles, their laughter a serene backdrop to my tangled thoughts. Watching them brought me joy, yet I couldn't shake the anxiousness lining my spine. I figured this outing would foster unity. My daughter-in-law leaned in closely as I settled onto the bench beside her. "He really loves to spend time with you," she said, motioning toward my son as he played with the children. "But, you know, kids tend to gravitate toward the more fun parent." Her words were pointed, sharp like daggers. I felt them land, each one a reminder that she was deliberately undermining my relationship with my grandchildren. I gave a polite nod, forcing a smile through the quiver in my voice. I made a mental note. This was not only blatant disrespect, it was one more piece of evidence worth documenting. Back at home, I sat alone at the kitchen table and penned yet another entry into my journal, my thoughts rushing from my mind to the page. I reflected on the way she stood behind my son, always guiding, gently poking fun. It sickened me how effortlessly she seemed to weave the fabric of our family while discarding the values I had spent years teaching my children. Each encounter brought an emotional weight. However, I realized I was now armed with clarity. I was no longer just a passive recipient of these acts. Instead, I learned to draw strength from my observations and experiences, recognizing them as the necessary stepping stones on my path to reclaiming my dignity. With every written entry, I fortified my spirit. I would confront her, standing on the firm ground of my experiences and loving choices. The confrontation loomed before me like a storm, tense, powerful, and exhilarating. Don't let her mute you at the table, never in your heart. The mantra echoed in my mind, a lighthouse guiding me to the shores of resolution. Spring began to bloom outside, vibrant and lively, reflecting the revival within me. I no longer feared her words. I would take my stand. The sunlit garden that had once been a backdrop to my despair became a canvas for renewed hope. I envisioned my grandchildren thriving amidst a family built on respect, compassion, and deep understanding. The loving legacy I desperately wished to reel back into existence. The air was alive with the sense of blooming flowers as spring fully took hold, and I felt that maybe, just maybe, this would be the season of transformation for me as well. I had made my decision. It was time to confront my daughter-in-law. Each incident I documented provided the ammunition I needed, the clarity of my thoughts lacing my resolve with an empowered edge. As the date of the family gathering approached, my anxiety, mixed with anticipation, surged within me. I pictured her smirk, her dismissive laughter, and I felt the fear rise only to stifle it quickly with the resolve that had grown over the past months. More than just her words, it was about reasserting my identity as a loving grandmother and mother, and reclaiming my rightful place at the table. I took comfort in the thought that my son would ultimately understand what was at stake. I recalled the bond we once shared, built on love but too often fractured by the dynamics of new relationships. On the day of the gathering, I awoke early. The soft morning light streamed through the kitchen window as I prepared a family favorite, lasagna. Layer by layer, the rich scents of cheese and tomatoes wafted through the air, welcoming the nostalgia of family meals past. As I boiled the lasagna noodles, I felt an unusual blend of strength and sorrow flow through me. Every time I stirred the bubbling sauce, a surge of determination pushed me forward. My home filled with laughter as my grandchildren arrived, their energy infectious. They rushed through the door, ranging from toddlers grasping their parents' hands to older children who sprinted immediately into playful chaos. It reminded me that what I fought for was so much more than the validation of my presence. It was their heritage, enshrined within the love between generations. My son came through the door next. His eyes brightened as he picked up one of the little ones and hugged them tight. I smiled at the sight, a small flicker of hope igniting in my chest. Yet, as the door swung open for my daughter-in-law, I felt that familiar chill creep back in. She stepped into the warmth with a practiced smile, an air of self-assurance enveloping her. The gathering progressed with initial lightness, hugs exchanged and laughter bubbling up. We settled into the familiar chatter of a family dinner, but I could already sense her undercurrents as she flitted around the kitchen, arranging things according to some hidden agenda. Each compliment she offered felt rehearsed and transactional. With each passing moment, the uncomfortable parameters established by my daughter-in-law were palpable. As dinner was served, I made a conscious effort to engage with the children, playing games and recounting stories that had once thrilled them. Yet, with each word I spoke, I could feel her gaze piercing through me, weighing my efforts. It made my heart race, but also propelled me forward. I had to hold my ground, show not just my strength, but also the warmth that family traditions could offer. When her dismissive remarks began to emerge from behind her flowing laughter, I felt the tightening in my chest, the urge to retreat bubbling beneath the surface. "Wow, Grandma gets so enthusiastic about food," she pointed out, forcing a laugh. "Maybe she was trying to win us all over with lasagna." The laughter from the table flowed, but I stood still, allowing the heat of recognition to wash over me. This was it. She was trying to constrict not only my voice, but the memories I sought to pass down. I felt the conviction rise like a swell of the ocean crashing over me. "I'm glad at least some of us appreciate a good home-cooked meal," I replied calmly, the sting of her quip igniting a fierce determination in me. Food is about more than just filling our stomachs. It's about creating bonds and holding memories together. The table fell silent for a moment, surprised by my sudden fortitude. I seized this breath of clarity, looking into my son's eyes, searching for a glimmer of support. He met my gaze, an unfathomable depth held within his expression. Then I turned to my daughter-in-law, holding her stare unwaveringly. "I've noticed how you often dismiss my efforts and how they shape the experiences my grandchildren have," I stated, feeling every word push through the layers of anxiety that had long constricted my throat. "My joy and love are not competing with yours. They are a part of what we create together as a family." She opened her mouth to retort, but I pressed on, refusing to back down. "You've made your feelings quite clear in your actions, and it's affected not just me but the family dynamic overall. I want us all to thrive together. But if we are to be a family, I need my voice to be part of that too. I ask you to see me, not just as a shadow in your plans, but as your children's grandmother and your ally." Moments stretched infinitely, the weight of my words filling the room with an air thick enough to grasp. For the first time, an uncomfortable silence enveloped us. My heart pounded in my chest, each thump urging me forward against the rising tide. "Don't let her mute you at the table, never in your heart," I reminded myself internally. My daughter-in-law shifted slightly, her expression twisting from shock to something unreadable. It was as if time had momentarily stopped, every breath drawn sharply as we faced each other. The air felt electric with the charged understanding that could break either way. I half expected her to retort, to laugh off my boldness, but instead there was only silence. Finally, after a long pause, she offered a tight smile, the edges rigid. "You're right. We should be creating beautiful memories together." The words lacked sincerity, but hung in the air, the subtle acknowledgement of my position piercing through the charade. My son looked between us, confusion and surprise etched on his face. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere shifted, the tension warping into something different, a fragile unity that had yet to be established. We finished the meal while unspoken thoughts danced among us. The children laughed. My daughter-in-law was quieter yet different, considering her next moves. It wasn't an outright win, but it felt like a crack had formed through the barrier she established. After they left, as darkness settled and the remnants of dinner lay scattered on the table, I exhaled deeply, a wave of relief bathing over me. I was exhausted, but within that fatigue lay a nuanced satisfaction, a quiet victory. I hadn't erased the challenges or doubts, but my truth had finally been spoken. That night, as I scribbled in my journal, I reflected on the journey up until that point. The battles would continue, but I could carry the strength from this moment moving forward. I had taken a stand, and the act had lit a flame in me. Tonight marked not the end, but a beginning. I could grow alongside my family, reclaiming the warmth around our shared history, bound even more tightly by the respect I had fought so hard to protect. In the weeks that followed my confrontation, a new rhythm emerged in our family dynamic, a complex dance filled with tension and unspoken agreements. I felt as if we were all teetering on a tightrope, a delicate balance between acceptance and resistance. My daughter-in-law had transformed subtly since our dinner, revealing glimpses of vulnerability mixed with the usual bravado she wore like armor. Gradually, she began showing more interest in family gatherings. With every text invitation, each suggestion for outings with the kids, her attempts to connect felt like testing waters after a storm. But beneath her gestures was an unmistakable edge. A quiet calculation reminded me that she was still very much an opponent in this subtle war. One Saturday afternoon, I invited everyone for a picnic at a nearby park. The sun hung low in the early spring sky, casting a golden shimmer on the blossoming daffodils. I laid out a colorful blanket under the branches of an old oak, spreading out sandwiches and fresh fruit, hoping the cheerful atmosphere might soften our hearts. My grandchildren raced around, their laughter bubbling up like the cheerful birds singing in the trees. Watching them brought warmth to my heart, moments of pure joy flashing like photographs. Coffee cups in hand, my son and daughter-in-law settled onto the blanket with me, and I glanced at them as they exchanged playful teasing. It felt like a tentative truce, an attempt to reconnect amidst the cracks that had formed. As we enjoyed our meal, I allowed myself to drift into the picturesque moment, letting go of any lingering doubts. But just as I began to believe the air felt lighter, she struck again, her voice tinged with sarcasm after I reminisced about story time when my children were toddlers. "It's sweet that you believe we'd repeat the same old tales, but the kids have outgrown all that, haven't they?" she quipped, the lightness in her tone surfacing beneath layers of mockery. My heart sank, the jagged edge of her comment cutting through the innocence of the moment. I can never seem to escape this tension. Taking a sip of my coffee, I succeeded in swallowing my frustration. In that packed space, with my son caught off guard, I leaned into my willpower. "Stories have a funny way of sticking with us, much like our memories," I said with calm resolve. "They shape who we are. Perhaps they haven't outgrown the things we thought they had." Her eyes narrowed, but instead of fanning the flames of our conversation further, she pivoted, her expression shifting from playful disdain to something resembling contemplation. There was a flicker in her demeanor, a gasping breath of understanding, but the shift vanished as quickly as it emerged. I sensed that beneath her banter lay the remnants of my previous confrontation, smoldering as if she feared another resurgence in the dynamic between us. As the afternoon drifted on, the unfolding moments felt like a fragile dance, just the three of us alternating steps between tension and familiarity. My son remained in the middle, an unsuspecting referee navigating the grounds of his childhood nostalgia, warped by the lively presence of his wife. Returning to our respective homes that evening, I felt the weight of unspoken words mingle in the air. It was clear the battle wasn't over. I still had much ground to cover. My journal had become a reservoir of unresolved feelings, each entry evolving from mere records of humiliation into reflections of hope and potential. They were essential now, shaping a plan for the coming weeks. Our upcoming family gathering for my grandson's birthday was looming. In the days leading up to it, I felt a tremor of anxiety mixed with optimism. This was my opportunity to solidify the changes I had begun to instigate in our relationships. I sought a chance not just to celebrate, but to redefine our interactions more purposefully. The day arrived and I awoke early with anticipation bubbling inside. I prepared my secret dessert, my rich chocolate cake embellished with whipped cream and fresh strawberries, but this time I sprinkled a piece of my heart onto the canvas, adding the flavor of love rather than seeing it reduced merely to duty. As guests began to arrive, voices and laughter floated through the air like music, the highs buzzing in a rhythm of joy. I set the table with purpose, arranging plates and utensils meticulously, as reflections of my commitment to our family. Yet, as one by one my family members entered, I sensed a shift within their interactions. My daughter-in-law, looking polished and cool, greeted guests with an ease I had not observed for months. However, when she reached me, the mockery returned to her voice, sliding off her tongue like poison. "I hope you didn't forget my favorite store-bought cake." With participants laughing and everyone gathered, I felt the momentum shift against me. But underneath the sting of her words, I sensed something different. There were no dismissive jabs or barbed laughter at my expense, just a flicker of amusement mingling with curiosity, perhaps even acknowledgement. Choosing to remain calm, I met her gaze. "You know, I think we can make that work together. You bring the store-bought and I'll work on my version if you'd like." The words struck my tongue like a practiced line, but I knew they represented immense growth. Her slight smile offered only a glimpse of an opening. Then, as the cake was sliced and laughter erupted once again, I crossed my fingers that within the laughter lay the seeds of respect. At the end of the night, as children played and our conversations flowed in a joyous dance, I felt a sense of guarded hope, as if the barriers standing between my daughter-in-law and me began to dissolve, piece by piece. Though we had treated each other with careful suspicion, I started to believe we were on the verge of something new, something that could rekindle the familial warmth we all craved. When the party wound down and the last glow of sunset colored the sky in hues of orange and purple, I stood alone in the kitchen reflecting on the evening. My heart swelled, a mixture of gratitude and determination, filled with the knowledge that the journey was still ahead of me. Each interaction, each moment of tension or acceptance offered hints towards deeper understanding and coexistence. "Don't let her mute you at the table. Never in your heart," I reminded myself again, the mantra soothing my restless spirit. I was becoming a catalyst for the change I wanted. The love shouldn't just be buried beneath layers of laughter and mockery. Resolutely, I vowed to pursue this path of understanding, both for myself and my grandchildren, for their future depended on the strength of the bonds we create today. As summer drifted in, bringing with it long, sun-drenched days, I found a new rhythm setting in with my daughter-in-law. The harsh tones of mockery that once clawed at our interactions softened into tentative laughter. Family gatherings became spaces of cautious optimism. Lingering glances turned into shared smiles, and every conversation felt like an opportunity to bridge the divide that had long kept us apart. One afternoon, we found ourselves in the kitchen, both of us submerged in the comforting chaos of food preparation. Flour dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through the window while I worked on my mother's famous bread recipe. I hadn't intended for her to join me, but there she stood, curious and eager. "What are you making?" she asked with a genuine spark in her eyes, an openness I had longed for. With an unexpected nod, she stepped forward. As we kneaded the dough, exchanging stories of our families, I could feel walls crumbling around us. It was in these simple yet profound moments that I began to see her as more than just a daughter-in-law. She was a woman navigating her own battles, and the laughter that wove between us began to stitch our fragmented relationship together. Yet, the ghosts of our past loomed nearby, ever present despite the warmth of our budding connection. One evening after our familiarly charged barbecue, I watched as she subtly chided my son for missing a catch during the game. Her light-hearted jab was more piercing than she realized. Searching for an anchor, I decided to intervene, unwilling to let past patterns sweep us back into old habits. "We all need encouragement, don't we?" I said, my voice steady. The air hung thick with uncharted tension as we locked eyes. As she processed my words, surprise flickered across her face. For the first time, it seemed, I caught a glimpse of vulnerability behind her bravado. "You're right," she conceded, a soft note in her voice. But the moment was fragile, like a soap bubble threatening to burst. As dusk settled and children ran about with sparklers, I felt a pull to seize the day. With everyone gathered, I called for a toast. "Family means love," I began, my heart bounding within my chest. "We've experienced both highs and lows, but I believe we can grow together. It's about lifting each other up whenever possible." Once again, silence enveloped us as I glanced at my daughter-in-law, gauging her reaction. Her expression had transformed, reflecting a mix of surprise and contemplation. The toast was met with a chorus of agreement from my son, relatives, and friends, glasses clinking in joyous recognition. Afterward, as the party subsided and the last of the sunlight played over the horizon, I slipped into quiet reflection in the kitchen, a space that had transformed into my sanctuary. The remnants of half-eaten cake and sparkling glasses surrounded me, mirroring the chaos and comfort present in family life. A swell of gratitude washed over me. We were at a new junction, one marked by hope rather than division. Just then, my daughter-in-law joined me, her eyes scanning the remnants of the meal. "You did well tonight. It felt nice," she said, her tone softer than before, as if breaking through layers she'd built over time. "Thank you," I replied, my heart racing at the prospect of honesty. "I have to admit it feels good having you here with me, cooking and sharing." She nodded appreciatively, eyes shining with an unexpected warmth. I felt the metaphoric distance closing in, yet I remained aware of the challenges that lay ahead. The journey of rebuilding trust and understanding would be fraught with uncertainty. In my thoughts, the mantra echoed, "Don't let her mute you at the table, never in your heart." I understood that I held the responsibility to usher in growth, not just for myself, but for the family I cherished. Together, we were navigating through the residual complexity of our lives, inching toward fresh beginnings. This was a commitment, a promise to myself, my children, and my grandchildren. I would set the stage for love to thrive in this family, valuing each moment of connection as a foundation for our future. I felt invigorated, eager to embrace the lively chaos of family gatherings and the unpredictable journey that awaited us, knowing each step forward was a testament to the dignity we fought to reclaim together.